My name is Harry, 27 years old, broke, and working the kind of office job that slowly kills you from the inside. Every day my manager dumped impossible amounts of work on me, and every day I swallowed my frustration because I needed the salary. Being poor doesn't leave you with many choices. There was one thing that always helped me escape reality for a while: novels. I loved reading stories where ordinary people awakened powerful systems and turned their miserable lives around. I used to laugh and think, if only something like that happened to me. Looking back, I really should have been more careful what I wished for. One night, after finishing another late shift, I started walking back to my tiny rented room. It wasn't far from the office, and honestly, I couldn't even afford public transport every day. As I walked through the dimly lit street, I was thinking about those novels again, imagining what life would be like if I ever got my own system. Then, without any warning, a speeding car came from behind. I never even had the chance to turn around. The impact threw me several meters through the air before I crashed onto the road. The car itself slammed into a nearby wall, but I couldn't care less about that. Warm blood flowed down my face as I struggled to breathe. At that moment, I knew I was dying. I wasn't thinking about money anymore. I wasn't thinking about work either. All I could think about were the dreams I would never achieve. I never bought my own house, never owned my dream car. I never even got the courage to confess to the girl I liked back in college. And just like that, everything went dark. When I opened my eyes again, I wasn't in heaven. I wasn't in hell either. I was floating inside an endless black space that stretched farther than I could see. Before I could understand anything, a cold voice echoed through the darkness. System 019-736-4946. Your mission is to descend to Earth and assist a designated human host. I frowned. System? Who was this guy talking to? A strange white sphere floated in front of me. I had absolutely no idea what it was supposed to be. But before I could ask anything, a flood of memories exploded inside my head. Seconds later, I froze. You've got to be kidding me. Those memories belonged to me. No, to a system. After dying, I hadn't reincarnated as some overpowered hero. I hadn't become a billionaire. I hadn't even become a dragon. I had literally reincarnated as a system. I almost lost my mind. I wanted a system in my life, not become one. Unfortunately, the glowing ball in front of me didn't care about my feelings in the slightest. It was the leader of the system department. Apparently, every system was assigned a human host to guide, so the world's storyline continued as planned. I wanted to complain. I wanted to refuse. I wanted to ask at least 1,000 questions. But before I could say a single word, the leader casually flicked a finger. The next thing I knew, space twisted around me, and I was thrown through countless dimensions like a piece of luggage. Seriously, even after dying, I still couldn't escape having a boss. Back on Earth, my manager treated me like a machine. Now that I was dead, I had somehow found an even worse manager. My life really was a joke. As I was tumbling through space, I made up my mind. I wasn't helping anyone. No chance. I'd spent my entire previous life working under a terrible boss. Now that I was finally dead, they wanted me to become someone else's unpaid assistant? Forget it. If being a system meant spending eternity helping random people achieve their dreams while I did all the work, then they had chosen the wrong guy. I was going to do absolutely nothing. Eventually, the spinning stopped. The scenery around me became clear, and I realized I was floating in the middle of a luxurious living room. Well, at least this place looked richer than my apartment. I looked around. A middle-aged man stood there holding a leather belt with a furious expression. Two young women stood nearby, both glaring at a teenage boy who was kneeling on the floor with his head lowered. On the sofa sat a beautiful woman, gently comforting another boy who was pretending to cry. The atmosphere was so tense that even I stopped complaining for a moment. Curious, I floated closer. The man suddenly shouted, "Tell me where you hid David's watch, and how dare you hit him?" The crying boy wiped away fake tears before speaking in the most dramatic voice I had ever heard. "Father, don't blame brother too much. Maybe he just liked the watch." I blinked, then blinked again. That was some of the worst acting I had ever witnessed. Seriously, I've seen school plays with more convincing performances. Even I could tell he was lying, and I had only been here for a few seconds. Then the woman gently hugged the crying boy. "Max, why did you hit David?" One of the girls crossed her arms. "You stole his watch and attacked him. You don't deserve to stay in this house." The other nodded immediately. "Just apologize to David and accept your punishment." I looked at every single person in the room. Then I looked back at David. Then at everyone again. Are all of you blind? No, seriously. Was I the only sane person here? The fake kid couldn't have made it any more obvious if he had held up a sign saying, "Asterisk, I'm lying." Asterisk. Just then, the boy kneeling on the floor finally spoke. I didn't steal anything. Before he could finish, one of the sisters interrupted. "He's denying it again." The father completely lost his patience. Without another word, he swung the belt with all his strength. Crack! The sound echoed through the room. The boy cried out in pain before collapsing onto the floor. He didn't move. Silence filled the living room. A few seconds passed. One of the sisters finally frowned. "Why isn't he getting up?" I stared at her in disbelief. "Now you noticed?" The mother hurried over in panic while the father dropped the belt from his trembling hand. I didn't mean." The boy remained motionless. Everyone suddenly realized something was terribly wrong. Within moments, they rushed him to the hospital. I silently followed behind them. At first, I still planned on ignoring everything. But after watching what had just happened, I wasn't so sure anymore. The ride to the hospital was strangely quiet. Nobody spoke. The mother kept crying while holding the unconscious boy's hand. The father stared at the floor, unable to meet anyone's eyes. The two sisters looked nervous, while the fake heir, David, kept pretending to be worried. Honestly, after watching that performance back at the house, I couldn't take a single expression on his face seriously anymore. While everyone rushed into the emergency ward, I simply floated after them. One advantage of being a system, walls meant absolutely nothing. The doctors immediately began treating the boy while I waited outside. For the first time since my death, I noticed a glowing panel floating in front of me. Oh, a system interface. Now this was interesting. Since I had nothing else to do, I opened it. As countless pieces of information entered my mind, I finally understood where I was. So that's how it is. This world wasn't an ordinary world. It was actually the setting of one of those novels I used to read in my previous life. The unconscious boy was named Max, the biological son of one of the richest families in the country, the real heir. Unfortunately for him, right after his birth, he had been swapped with another baby. That other baby, David, had grown up enjoying everything that should have belonged to Max. Meanwhile, Max spent years suffering outside the family. Eventually, he was found and brought back home. But instead of receiving the love he deserved, he became an outsider inside his own house. His parents favored David. His sisters adored David. No matter what happened, whenever the two of them stood against each other, everyone believed David. Every single time. I let out a long sigh. Poor kid. No wonder he looked so lifeless back there. He hadn't just been beaten today. He had been carrying years of disappointment. As I continued reading the information, another line caught my attention. Host. Max. So he's the human I'm supposed to bind with. I scratched my head out of habit before remembering. Right. I didn't even have a body anymore. Great. An hour later, the operation finally ended. The doctor walked outside. The patient is out of danger. Everyone immediately stood up. But the doctor's expression became serious. His body is severely malnourished. He has numerous old injuries that were never properly treated. Judging from his condition, this child has been abused for quite some time. Silence. Absolute silence. I slowly turned toward the family. The mother looked horrified. The father couldn't say a word. Even the sisters froze. As for David, for just a split second, I saw annoyance flash across his face before he quickly hid it. The doctor looked at them in confusion. Are you really his family? Nobody answered. After saying a few more instructions, the doctor left. The family remained standing there, unable to process what they had just heard. I ignored them completely. Instead, I floated straight into Max's hospital room. The boy lay peacefully on the bed, covered in bandages. I moved closer to get a better look. Then, I froze. What? I floated even closer. No way. My heart almost stopped. Well, if I still had one. The face lying on that hospital bed. It was mine. Exactly mine. The same black hair. The same face. The same appearance I had before dying. For a long moment, I simply stared at him. Then everything suddenly made sense. No wonder. Different world. Different life. But the same face. It felt as if fate had played one final joke on me. A strange feeling rose inside my chest. If I had reincarnated as a human, maybe I would have looked exactly like him. I smiled bitterly. You know, I couldn't save myself. But maybe I can save you. The moment those words left my mouth, I made my decision. Forget what I had said before. Forget refusing my job. Forget wasting time. If there was one person in this world worth helping, it was him. Without another moment of hesitation, I entered Max's consciousness. The moment I entered his consciousness, the world around me changed. The hospital room disappeared. Instead, I found myself standing inside an endless white space. Not far away, a boy sat with his knees pulled against his chest, staring blankly into nothingness. He didn't even notice me at first. Seeing him like that, couldn't help but sigh. He looked like someone who had already given up on life. I slowly walked over and stopped in front of him. Hey, he looked up. His eyes met mine. For a second, neither of us spoke. Then his expression slowly changed from confusion to shock. You. He pointed at my face. You look exactly like me. I laughed awkwardly. Yeah, I noticed. I don't really know why either. The atmosphere became strangely quiet. Finally, he asked, who are you? I smiled. Well, this is going to sound ridiculous. I'm your system. He blinked. System. Yep. The kind that gives missions, rewards, and helps the protagonist become stronger. He stared at me for several seconds before asking in complete seriousness. Did I die? No. Unfortunately, you're still alive. He lowered his head again. I see. There wasn't even relief in his voice, only disappointment. That answer caught me off guard. Hey, you don't sound very happy about surviving. He remained silent. After a long while, he finally spoke. I'm tired. I really am. I thought maybe dying would have been easier. Hearing those words, I couldn't even joke anymore. The memories I had read through the system interface flashed through my mind. Years of neglect. Years of being blamed. Years of trying desperately to earn affection that never came. Anyone would eventually break. I sat down beside him. For a while, neither of us spoke. Finally, I broke the silence. You know, I understand you more than you think. He looked at me. I wasn't exactly living some amazing life before I died either. I worked every single day just to survive. My manager treated me like a machine. I had dreams. A house. A car. A girlfriend. I laughed at myself. Pretty ordinary dreams. But I died before achieving any of them. Max quietly listened. So, I know what it feels like to think life isn't fair. I stood up and stretched. Which is exactly why I'm not letting your story end like this. He looked at me silently. I smiled. It's real. Oh, it's very real. The moment the binding was complete, another screen appeared before me. Looks like being a system came with plenty of notifications. Well, at least this boss didn't send emails. I looked at Max. He was still staring at me in surprise, probably wondering whether everything that had just happened was real. It is, I said. And from now on, just listen to me. I'll help you. He nodded. I opened my system interface. Since I had officially bound with my host, many previously locked functions had become available. One thing immediately caught my attention. Credits. Apparently, every positive change in my host's life earned me credits, and those credits could be exchanged for countless items in the system store. Healing items, body enhancement, intelligence enhancement, skills, buffs. There were so many things that I couldn't even finish reading them all. So that's how systems become overpowered. I muttered. Without wasting any time, I searched for something useful. Max's body was currently in terrible condition. Even if he woke up, he wouldn't be able to do much. After looking around for a while, I found exactly what I needed. Healing elixir. It wasn't expensive either. I immediately exchanged my credits for it. Alright, stay still. Max looked confused. What's happening? I'm fixing your body. The bottle disappeared from my hand and turned into countless tiny particles of light before merging into his soul. Within seconds, I could clearly feel his injuries recovering. His broken bones, his bruises, his internal injuries. Everything slowly began healing. Not completely, just enough for him to wake up safely. I could heal him instantly if I wanted, but that would only make everyone suspicious. There was no reason to expose ourselves this early. After making sure everything was stable, I looked at him seriously. Listen carefully. The moment you wake up, don't cry, don't argue, don't explain yourself, and don't react to anything they say. He frowned. But, I interrupted him. They've already made up their minds about you. No matter what you say right now, they won't believe you. So let them think whatever they want. He stayed silent. There's one more thing. He looked at me. Stop chasing their approval. You came back to this family because they're your blood relatives. But don't mistake blood for love. If they really cared about you, none of this would have happened. So from today onward, think about yourself first. You have money. You have status. And now, you have me. A faint smile appeared on his face. Okay, I nodded. Good. Now wake up. The white space around us slowly disappeared. My vision returned to the hospital room. A second later, Max slowly opened his eyes. Everyone immediately noticed. His father quickly walked over. His mother tightly held his hand. David stood behind. I simply shook my head. Not now. He quietly closed his eyes again and pretended to sleep. No arguments. No explanations. Nothing. The family could only leave the room. And for the next few days, while Max recovered in the hospital, the two of us simply talked. I explained how the system worked. He told me about his life. Little by little, we became familiar with each other. By the time the hospital discharged him, I had already spent most of my credits strengthening his body, improving his physique, sharpening his mind, and preparing him for what was waiting back at the villa. Because I knew, the real battle was only about to begin. I'll continue while staying faithful to your original story and keeping Harry as the narrator. A few days passed in the blink of an eye. Honestly, those few days were much more peaceful than I expected. Since Max was recovering in the hospital, no one came to bother us much. It gave me enough time to familiarize myself with my new job. Although I still refused to admit I actually liked being a system. Every day I checked my interface. The system store was ridiculously huge. There were martial arts, cultivation techniques, scientific knowledge, healing skills, bloodlines. Even things that sounded completely absurd. Unfortunately, almost everything was outrageously expensive. I could only afford the basic upgrades for now, so I spent the credits wisely. First, I strengthened Max's physique. Then I improved his body's recovery. After that, I slightly enhanced his intelligence. Nothing too shocking. Just enough so that he wouldn't be pushed around anymore. Meanwhile, Max and I talked a lot. The more I learned about his past, the angrier I became. He never hated his family. Even after everything they had done, he still wanted their approval. I honestly couldn't understand it. One day, I finally asked him, why do you still care so much about them? He smiled bitterly. They're my family. I immediately shook my head. No, they're related to you by blood. That doesn't automatically make them family. He looked at me silently. I continued, Max, listen carefully. You only get one life. Don't waste it trying to make people love you. If someone truly cares about you, you won't have to beg for their affection. And if they don't, I shrugged. Then stop expecting anything from them. He lowered his head. I'll try. I smiled. That's enough. A few days later, the doctor finally discharged him. As we walked out of the hospital, the family's driver was already waiting outside. The master has sent me to bring young master home. Young master. What an ironic title. The entire ride back was quiet. Max looked out of the window while I floated beside him. As the villa slowly came into view, I smiled. Ready. He took a deep breath. Ready. The car stopped. The driver opened the door. Max stepped out. I floated beside him as we walked through the entrance. The moment we entered the living room, everyone was already waiting. Richard, Evelyn, Alex, Diana, and of course, David. No one welcomed Max home. No one asked how he was feeling. Instead, the first thing Richard said was, Max, what are you waiting for? Apologized to David. I almost thought I had heard him wrong. I stared at Richard, then at David, then back at Richard. You've got to be kidding me. The kid had just returned from the hospital after nearly dying. And the first thing they wanted was an apology? Even Max couldn't believe it. He calmly asked, and what exactly am I apologizing for? The entire room fell silent. David quickly stepped forward with that same fake innocent expression. Brother, let's forget what happened. You don't have to apologize. I almost rolled my non-existent eyes. Here he goes again. Max ignored him completely. Instead, he repeated, what am I apologizing for? Richard frowned. If it weren't for your mistake, none of this would have happened. You should have admitted what you did. I looked at Max. He looked at me. Neither of us said anything for a moment. Then, the two of us came to exactly the same conclusion. Enough was enough. I quietly said, ask him for proof. Max nodded. He looked straight at Richard. What proof do you have that I stole the watch? And what proof do you have that I hit David? For the first time, no one in the room answered immediately. Here's the next part. Staying faithful to your original story while keeping Harry as the sole narrator. For the first time since Max returned to this family, no one answered. Richard frowned before saying, David himself said you stole it. Isn't that proof enough? Before Max could reply, Diana crossed her arms. Exactly. David would never lie. Couldn't help but sigh. Seriously, these people didn't need evidence. They just needed David to open his mouth. I quietly said to Max, don't argue with them. Use facts. Max nodded. He looked calmly at everyone. You've installed CCTV cameras all over this house, haven't you? Richard frowned. Yes. Then let's check the footage. The room instantly became quiet. Before anyone else could speak, Diana let out a cold laugh. You really think we're stupid? You probably switched the cameras off before stealing the watch. I almost laughed. The funny part was, she accidentally guessed what had really happened. David had indeed turned the cameras off. At least, that was what originally happened in this world story. But I wasn't an ordinary system. One of the abilities I had recently discovered allowed me to rewrite small parts of the storyline. Changing major events required an enormous amount of credits, but correcting something this small, I could afford it. So while everyone was busy arguing, I quietly rewrote that part of the story. The cameras had never gone offline. Every second had been recorded. Simple. David, of course, knew nothing about it. I glanced at him. Although he looked calm on the outside, I could clearly see panic slowly appearing on his face. Good. For the first time, the hunter was becoming the hunted. Richard finally spoke. Fine. If you're so confident, we'll watch the footage, he called the butler. A few moments later, the CCTV recording was displayed on the television in the living room. Everyone's attention turned toward the screen. David stared at it without blinking. I smiled to myself. Go ahead. Watch carefully. The recording began. Clearly showed David entering Max's room. He quietly placed the watch inside. Then, after making sure no one was watching, he left. A few minutes later, he deliberately threw himself on the staircase before screaming for help. Silence. Absolute silence. Every pair of eyes slowly turned toward David. His face had already turned pale. For a few seconds, he couldn't even speak. Finally, he forced out an awkward smile. I think. I remembered wrongly. I must have forgotten my watch in brother's room. I got scared. So I misunderstood him. I almost burst out laughing. What an unbelievable excuse. Unfortunately, his family actually looked as though they were willing to accept it. Max looked at me. I simply smiled. We're not done yet. He nodded. Then he calmly asked, so, what about you saying I hit you? David froze. Maybe. I imagined that too. I was frightened. So I said the wrong thing. I looked at Richard, then at Evelyn, then at the sisters. Instead of questioning David, they actually looked relieved. Relieved that they had found an excuse to forgive him. Richard sighed. David, you shouldn't lie like that again. Evelyn gently rubbed David's shoulder. It's all right. Just be more careful next time. I blinked. That's it. Max had nearly been beaten to death because of those lies. And all David received was, don't do it again. I suddenly understood everything. This family didn't believe David because his lies were convincing. They believed him because they wanted to. That was the difference. Evidence had never mattered. Their feelings had. I quietly spoke. Max, it's your turn. He slowly stepped forward. A calm smile appeared on his face. But after spending days talking with him, I knew exactly what that smile meant. Someone was about to regret everything. Sure, here's that entire section rewritten so Harry creates the mission himself. Staying true to your story. Max slowly stepped forward. His face was calm. Too calm. After spending the last few days with him, I knew exactly what that expression meant. He wasn't angry anymore. He was disappointed. There was a huge difference. He looked directly at David. You know, because of your lies, I almost died. David unconsciously took a step back. I didn't mean. Max interrupted him. When father was beating me, why didn't you tell him the truth? David lowered his head. I was scared. I almost snorted. Scared? Fine. Let's pretend that excuse made sense. Max nodded. All right. You were scared. Then after I came back from the hospital, why were you still planning to make me apologize? This time, David couldn't answer. His mouth opened, but no words came out. The expressions of everyone in the room slowly changed. They finally realized something. If David had truly made an innocent mistake, why didn't he explain everything after Max survived? Why was he still acting like the victim? David desperately looked toward Evelyn, then Richard, then the sisters, looking for someone to save him. Just like always, Diana immediately stepped forward. Max, David was frightened. He wasn't thinking clearly. I quietly smiled. Still making excuses, huh? I looked at Max. Don't argue. Just remind them. He nodded. He looked toward Richard. You once told me, in this house, no one is allowed to lie. I remember that very clearly. Richard's face stiffened. Max continued. When you believed I lied, you beat me. So, he slowly turned toward David. He lied. What punishment will he receive? Silence. No one answered. Not Richard. Not Evelyn. Not Alex. Not Diana. Because everyone already knew the answer. Nothing. Absolutely nothing. Evelyn finally spoke. Mox. Let's just forget about it. David has already admitted his mistake. We're family. I almost laughed. Family? Interesting. When Max was beaten until he nearly died, nobody remembered they were family. But now that David was exposed, suddenly everyone wanted peace. Max lowered his head for a moment. When he raised it again, his eyes had become completely cold. I understand. My words were never important in this family. Looking at everyone's expressions, I knew this was the perfect moment. As a system, I wasn't waiting for missions from anyone. I was the one who created them. I opened my system interface and created Max's first real mission. Mission created objective * teach David the consequences of falsely accusing you. Reward * grandfather's hidden will. A smile appeared on my face. Perfect. I looked at Max. I've created a mission for you. He looked at the floating screen and immediately understood. So this is how it works. I nodded. I create the missions. You complete them, and I'll give you the reward. He smiled faintly. Understood. I looked toward David. Go. Complete your first mission. Without another word, David instinctively stepped backward. What are you doing? Max didn't answer. He simply clenched his fist. 4 years, he had endured every insult, every accusation, every humiliation. Today, he wasn't planning to endure anymore. The next second, his fist shot forward. Bang! The punch landed squarely on David's face. Blood burst from his nose as his entire body flew backward before crashing onto the floor. The entire living room fell silent. David screamed while clutching his face. Everyone stood frozen. No one had expected Max to actually fight back. I smiled as another notification appeared before me. Mission completed. I immediately claimed the reward. Congratulations, Max. You've completed your first mission. As promised. Here's your reward. With a thought, I rewrote a small part of the world's storyline. David lay on the floor, clutching his face as blood dripped from his nose. For a few seconds, nobody moved. Nobody spoke. They simply stared at Max as though he had become a completely different person. Alex was the first to react. Moksh, have you gone insane? Before Max could answer, everyone rushed toward David. Evelyn hurriedly helped him sit up while Diana anxiously checked his injuries. Richard's face darkened. He pointed angrily at Max. How dare you hit your younger brother? I almost laughed. Younger brother. Interesting. A few minutes ago they were calling him a liar. Now he had become the innocent younger brother again. Max calmly looked at Richard. I only punched him once. He accused me of beating him countless times. If I had really hit him with this much force every time he claimed. Max glanced at David, who was still crying on the floor. Do you think he'd still be alive? The room fell silent. No one could answer. Diana immediately stepped forward. Max. I shook my head. Really? I whispered to Max. Ask them one question. Max nodded. He looked directly at Evelyn. When father beat me until I almost died. Was violence wrong then? Evelyn's lips trembled. She opened her mouth, but nothing came out. Max continued calmly. When I was lying in the hospital, did any of you ask whether I was hurting? When the doctor said I was malnourished, did any of you wonder why? Silence. Again. Only silence. Richard finally regained his composure. He spoke in a cold voice. Enough. No matter what happened, you had no right to hit David. I think bringing you back to this family was a mistake. You don't deserve to stay in this house. Hearing those words, I wasn't angry. I actually smiled. Perfect. Everything was going exactly according to plan. Diana immediately agreed. Dad's right. If he can attack David in front of all of us, who knows what he'll do next? He should leave this house. Max looked at me. I simply smiled. It's time. He nodded slightly. Then, without the slightest trace of panic, he asked, Oh, and who exactly is throwing me out? Richard frowned. I am. I'm the head of this family. Max slowly sat down on the nearest sofa as if he were sitting in his own living room. A faint smile appeared on his face. I don't think you can. Richard frowned even harder. What do you mean? Max looked around the room before speaking. The owner can't be thrown out of his own house. The moment those words left his mouth, everyone froze. What? Richard looked at him in disbelief. What nonsense are you talking about? Alex frowned. What owner? Even David forgot the pain in his face and looked toward Max. I leaned against the wall with my arms folded. 3, 2, 1. Right on cue. The butler hurried into the living room. Master, Mr. Shaw has arrived. Richard's expression immediately changed. Uncle Shaw, what brings him here? The old man slowly walked into the villa with a dignified aura. Behind him followed a middle-aged lawyer carrying a black briefcase. Everyone respectfully greeted him. Well, everyone except Max. He remained seated. Mr. Shaw ignored everyone else. His eyes immediately landed on Max. A warm smile appeared on his face. So, I finally found you, young master. The entire room became deathly silent. David's expression froze. Richard and Evelyn looked at each other in shock. Young master? Who was he talking about? David forced a smile. Grandpa Shaw, did you mean me? The old man frowned. You? He looked at David as though he had heard the biggest joke of the year. No. I came here. For Max. At that moment, every expression in the room changed. The entire living room fell into complete silence. Richard looked at Mr. Shaw in disbelief. Max. Mr. Shaw glanced at him before snorting. Who else? I came here because the real young master called me. Richard instinctively looked toward Max. He couldn't understand how Max even knew Mr. Shaw. After all, they had never introduced Max to anyone outside the family. David forced a smile. Grandpa Shaw, I think there's some misunderstanding. I've been living with this family since childhood. Mr. Shaw's expression immediately turned cold. I know. That doesn't make you the young master. The Sterling family has only one young master, and that's Max Sterling. David's face turned pale. Richard finally spoke. Uncle Shaw, how did you even know about Max? Mr. Shaw laughed. You honestly believed you could hide something like this from me? I've known for quite some time. I simply waited until Max returned. Then he looked behind him. Bring it. The lawyer stepped forward carrying the black briefcase. I smiled. Perfect. Everything was going exactly according to plan. Richard frowned. Uncle, what is all this? Mr. Shaw looked at him with disappointment. I came today to return something that has always belonged to Max. The lawyer placed the briefcase on the table. Click. The locks opened. Inside, several neatly arranged documents appeared. Richard's heartbeat quickened. Somehow, he had a very bad feeling. The lawyer picked up the top document. This is the final will left behind by Chairman Sterling. The moment those words were spoken, everyone unconsciously held their breath. Richard immediately stood up. My father's will. How is that possible? I've never heard about this. Mr. Shaw calmly replied. Because your father never intended you to know until the right time. He entrusted it to me, and instructed me to hand it over only after Max returned. I quietly looked at Max. He looked back at me. Neither of us spoke. There was no need. Everything happening now was the reward I had created for completing the mission. The lawyer unfolded the document and began reading. According to Chairman Sterling's final will, the villa in which the Sterling family currently resides belongs solely to his grandson, Max Sterling. Everyone's eyes widened. The lawyer continued. In addition, 25% of Sterling Corporation's shares are transferred under Max Sterling's ownership. Richard's pupils contracted. 25%. That wasn't just money. That was enough to influence the entire corporation. Before anyone could recover, the lawyer opened another envelope. There is one more item. He took out a black bank card. This card contains $100 million. It was left as a gift for young Master Max Sterling. The room became completely silent. Even David forgot the pain in his swollen face. 100 million. That amount alone was enough to make countless people spend their entire lives chasing wealth. Richard slowly looked toward Mr. Shaw. Why? Why didn't father tell me any of this? Mr. Shaw looked at him with cold eyes. Because he already anticipated a possibility. If Max was never found, everything would eventually pass to the family. But the moment Max returned, everything written here automatically became his. Then Mr. Shaw's gaze shifted toward David. And judging from today's events, I'm beginning to understand why Chairman Sterling prepared this will in advance. David clenched his fists tightly. He finally understood. If Max had never returned, everything, the villa, the shares, the money, would eventually have become his. But now, it all belonged to Max. Max slowly stood up. A calm smile appeared on his face as he looked around the room. So, he glanced at Richard. A little while ago, you said you wanted to throw me out of this house. He chuckled softly. Young Master Max, your grandfather would be proud of you.
Max smiled politely.
Thank you, Grandpa Shaw. Mr. Shaw gently patted Max's shoulder. Then, he turned toward Richard. For several seconds, he simply stared at him. There was no anger, no shouting, just pure disappointment. Richard lowered his head, unable to meet his gaze. Mr. Shaw snorted softly before walking away. The lawyer picked up the briefcase and followed behind him. A moment later, the sound of a car driving away echoed outside the villa. The house fell silent once again. I floated beside Max, trying my best not to laugh. Everything had gone exactly according to our plan. Of course, there was one little secret nobody in that room knew. There had never been a hidden will. Not in the original story. Back when Max and I were still in the hospital, we had already discussed our first real move. If Max simply punched David, Richard would have immediately thrown him out of the Sterling villa. We would have lost our foothold before the game had even begun. So, I decided to rewrite a small part of the story. Instead of rewarding Max with money or some random skill, I created a hidden will. A will that logically could have existed all along. Chairman Sterling loved Max. Mr. Shaw had been the chairman's most trusted friend for decades. Nothing about the will contradicted the world's logic. It simply filled an empty gap in the story. That was the beauty of my power. I couldn't rewrite the entire world whenever I wanted. But as long as something was reasonable, I could make it become reality. That hidden will became the reward for completing Max's first mission. One punch. In exchange, ownership of the villa. 25% of Sterling Corporation. $100 million. Not bad for a first mission. I looked at Richard and couldn't help smiling. He still believed everything that had happened today was fate. He had no idea that every single step had been planned by a system. Me. And this was only the beginning. Dinner that night was unusually quiet. No one spoke. The atmosphere was so heavy that even the servants avoided making unnecessary noise. Max calmly ate his meal as if nothing had happened. I couldn't help smiling. The others, however, kept stealing glances at him. Finally, Richard put down his fork. Max, I've thought about today's incident. You should apologize to David. Max slowly looked up. For what? Richard frowned. You punched him. Max nodded slightly. I did. But if he hadn't lied, I wouldn't have been beaten half to death. He deserved that punch. Richard's expression darkened. He's already admitted his mistake. You still shouldn't have used violence. Max chuckled softly. So, you want me to apologize? Richard nodded. Yes. Max leaned back in his chair. As far as I know, an apology is given after making a mistake. I don't think I've made one. A vein bulged on Richard's forehead. Max. Max ignored his anger. Instead, a faint smile appeared on his face. Oh, I just thought of something. Everyone looked at him. How about this? I'll actually beat David properly this time. Then I'll throw him out of the villa. After that, I'll apologize. The dining room instantly fell silent. David's face turned deathly pale. Evelyn stood up in shock. Max. What are you saying? Alex and Diana stared at him in disbelief. Even Richard was speechless for a moment. I almost burst out laughing. Beautiful. Absolutely beautiful. The old Max would have apologized immediately. The new Max had just threatened David with a smile on his face. And the best part? Nobody could tell whether he was joking. The entire dining room fell silent. Everyone stared at Max in shock. No one had expected him to say something like that. Diana was the first to recover. She slammed her hand on the table. Max, when did you become so disrespectful? You're not even listening to father anymore. Have you forgotten? If we hadn't brought you back, you would have spent your entire life in that countryside. And now you're pointing fingers at our parents? You're truly shameless. She took a deep breath before continuing. And stop bringing up this owner of the house nonsense. Just because grandfather left you the villa doesn't mean you can act however you want. Max quietly looked at her. Then, he smiled. So, you're saying I should be grateful because you brought me back? Diana crossed her arms. Of course. Max slowly put down his fork. Grateful. He let out a soft laugh. Tell me, what exactly should I be grateful for? My previous life wasn't wealthy. But at least, I wasn't falsely accused. I wasn't beaten until I nearly died. I wasn't treated like an outsider in my own family. He looked at everyone sitting around the table. If I'm being honest, my life before coming here was far better. No one spoke. Max continued calmly. You called me shameless. But I think the truly shameless people are sitting right in front of me. The atmosphere instantly froze. After a brief pause, he continued. You finally found your real son. Your real brother. The child you've supposedly searched for all these years. But the first thing all of you did was protect the fake one. He lived here for 18 years. He enjoyed this family's love, this family's wealth, this family's luxury. And even after learning the truth, you still gave him everything. He looked directly at Richard and Evelyn. Tell me, when did any of you ever choose me? Silence. Not a single person could answer. Max leaned back in his chair. And as for this house, he glanced around the luxurious dining room. I didn't make myself the owner. Grandfather did. So whether you like it or not, it is what it is. He looked at everyone with an indifferent expression. If any of you have a problem with that, the door is right there. You're free to leave. The entire Sterling family froze. For the first time, they realized the obedient boy they had controlled for years was truly gone. Max looked around the table. Everyone had fallen silent. Richard's face was gloomy. Evelyn looked conflicted. Alex and Diana couldn't find a single word to refute him. Seeing the opportunity, David slowly lowered his head. His fists tightened beneath the table. A few moments later, he stood up. Mom! Dad! His voice trembled. I think I should leave. Everyone immediately turned toward him. He forced out a bitter smile. Brother Max is right. I've already lived 18 years of luxury. I've already received more than I ever deserved. I have no right to stay here any longer. He bowed his head. I'm sorry. I've caused too much trouble for this family. I'll pack my things after dinner. I won't make things difficult for anyone anymore. Tears slowly rolled down his cheeks. The dining room became even quieter. I looked at David and couldn't help smiling. What a clever move. He knew arguing now would only make him look worse. So instead, he chose to become the victim. And judging by everyone's expressions, it was working. Just as expected, Evelyn's face changed first. David! She instinctively stood from her chair. Richard's expression also softened. Alex bit her lip. Even Diana's anger disappeared, replaced by worry. Exactly as I expected. One sentence from David, and the atmosphere had completely shifted. The Sterling family had fallen for the same trick once again. For a brief moment, Max actually thought about it. If David left the Sterling family, wouldn't everything become much simpler? Before he could say anything, I spoke. Don't. Max glanced at me. But I shook my head. There's no need. The story won't let David leave. He'll stay here, so don't worry about him. I smiled. For now, just focus on eating. You've spent years being malnourished. Getting healthy is more important than arguing. Max looked at me for a second before giving a small nod. All right. Without another word, he continued eating. The entire Sterling family watched him in silence. David secretly let out a sigh of relief. For a moment, he had been certain Max would say something ruthless and force him to leave. But Max didn't even look at him. David suddenly found himself with nothing left to say. The atmosphere became strangely quiet. Finally, Richard broke the silence. Enough. No one is leaving this house. He looked at David. David, there's no need for you to leave. You're also our son. And the Sterling family is your family as well. David nodded with tears in his eyes. Thank you, Dad. Richard looked around the table. That's enough for today. Everyone finish your dinner. After that, go to your rooms. No one objected. The dining room fell silent once again. Only the sound of cutlery against plates could be heard. And so, the first day after Max's return finally came to an end. That night, after dinner, everyone returned to their rooms. The Sterling villa gradually became quiet. I looked at Max and smiled. Ready? Max looked at me. For what? A grin spread across my face. It's time. Max immediately understood. Without another question, he picked up his phone. A few minutes later, several men dressed in black quietly entered the villa. They respectfully bowed. Young Master Max. Max nodded. I need your help with something. The men exchanged glances before replying in unison. Understood. A few moments later, the group stopped outside David's bedroom. Max stood at the front. A faint smile rested on his face. Knock, knock. Asterisk asterisk no response. He knocked once more. Still nothing. Max glanced at one of the men. That single look was enough. Bang. The bodyguard kicked the bedroom door open. David, who had been sleeping peacefully, jolted awake. What? He looked toward the entrance. The moment he saw Max, standing there with several bodyguards behind him, his face instantly turned pale. For a split second, he thought they had come to beat him. But instead, the bodyguards ignored him completely. They walked straight into the room. Without saying a word, they began carrying everything outside. His clothes, his wardrobe, his books, his suitcase, even the decorations in the room. Everything. What are you doing? David hurriedly ran in front of Max. Brother, what is the meaning of this? Max simply stood there with a calm smile, not saying a single word. The sounds of furniture being moved echoed throughout the villa. Thud. Crash. Bang. Within moments, lights began turning on one after another. Bedroom doors opened. The Sterling family, who had just fallen asleep, were all awakened by the commotion. Within moments, Richard, Evelyn, Alex, Diana, everyone rushed downstairs. The first thing they saw was David standing outside his room. Several bodyguards were continuously carrying his belongings into the hallway. His wardrobe, his clothes, his books, even his bed. Everything was being removed. Alex's face darkened. She immediately stepped forward. Who are all of you? Why are you removing David's belongings? The bodyguards didn't even spare her a glance. They silently continued their work. David hurriedly ran toward them. His eyes had already turned red. Sister. They broke my door. They suddenly came in and started throwing everything out. Brother brought them here. The entire family immediately turned toward Max. Richard's face sank. Max, what is the meaning of this? Max calmly looked at him. I need a comfortable room to sleep. Diana frowned. What are you talking about? You already have a room downstairs. The moment those words left her mouth, Max left. A calm, mocking laugh. You all do know. That downstairs is the servants' quarters, right? He slowly looked around at everyone. Are you seriously expecting the owner of this house to sleep in a servant's room? The smiles on everyone's faces disappeared. Richard's eyes widened. Only now did the truth truly sink in. His own son, the real heir of the Sterling family, had been sleeping in the servants' quarters, while everyone else lived comfortably in luxurious bedrooms. He slowly turned toward Evelyn. Evelyn. His voice was filled with disbelief. What's going on? Evelyn immediately defended herself. Don't look at me like that. When Max first came home, you were there too. We all agreed on it. Richard frowned. I agreed because it was supposed to be temporary. David said he wasn't ready to adjust, so we let Max stay downstairs for a few days. He clenched his fists. But years have passed. Why was he still living there? I couldn't stop myself from laughing. What exactly are you two talking about? Who in this world needs time to adjust to becoming rich? If a wealthy person struggles to adapt to a poor life, that's understandable. But adjusting to luxury? I shook my head. What a ridiculous excuse. The truth is simple. That little devil never wanted to give up his room. Evelyn lowered her head. I didn't even realize Max was still staying there. He never brought it up. And we were busy with our own lives. Max finally spoke. Enough. Stop putting on a show. It doesn't matter anymore. I have a problem, so I'm solving it. He gave a small nod. It deserved furniture worthy of its owner. The workers immediately began arranging everything. The new king-size bed was placed in the center. A large wooden wardrobe stood against the wall. The study table was positioned beside the window. One by one, the empty room transformed into a luxurious master bedroom. The Sterling family simply stood there, watching everything unfold. No one dared to stop it. After all, every worker had only received one order. Follow young Master Max's instructions. Nearly an hour later, the last worker finally stepped outside. The bedroom was complete. Max quietly walked inside. He looked around once, then gave a satisfied nod. Perfect. Just then, a familiar sound echoed inside my mind. Ding! A smile appeared on my face. Mission completed. Rewards obtained. I couldn't help grinning. Looks like our next move is ready. A familiar notification echoed inside my mind. Mission completed. Rewards obtained. Max immediately opened the system panel. His eyes landed on the reward. Reward, plus 10 physical strength points. He looked at me in confusion. Physical strength? I smiled. That's right. Right now. Your biggest weakness isn't your intelligence. It isn't your authority either. It's your body. You've spent years being malnourished. If one day David decides to attack you with a group of people, you won't survive. So before anything else, we're going to build your foundation. My first goal is to make sure no ordinary person can overpower you. I looked at the floating panel. The credit count was still there. A faint smile appeared on my face. It's time. I'm going to turn you into someone no one can defeat. And today, that journey begins.
Max nodded.
Without hesitation, he accepted the reward. A warm current spread throughout his body. The exhaustion in his muscles gradually faded. Even though the change wasn't dramatic, he could clearly feel himself becoming stronger. I smiled. Not bad. But that's enough for today. Go to sleep. We'll continue tomorrow. To be honest, even I was getting sleepy.
Max chuckled.
All right. He looked toward the bodyguards. Thank you for your hard work. The men immediately bowed. It is our honor, young master.
Max nodded.
Take your positions. Don't let anyone come near this room tonight. Understood. After giving the order, Max entered his bedroom. Click. The door closed. Outside, the Sterling family was still standing in the hallway. Richard frowned. I was going to speak with him. Alex sighed. So was I. They had all been waiting for the bodyguards to leave. Unfortunately for them, that opportunity never came. One of the bodyguards stepped forward.
I'm sorry.
Young Master Max has ordered that no one is allowed near his room. Please return to your own rooms. No one dared to argue. One by one, they reluctantly left. David silently picked up the few belongings he still had and walked toward the servants' quarters downstairs. The hallway finally became quiet. Morning arrived. As always, I woke up first. Old habits from my previous life were hard to break. I floated over to the bed. Max, wake up. Max slowly opened his eyes. The moment I saw his face, I smiled. After years of sleeping in the cramped servants' quarters, he had finally enjoyed a peaceful night's sleep. It showed. His complexion looked healthier. Even the dark circles beneath his eyes had faded. He stretched comfortably before smiling. Good morning. I grinned. Good morning. Ready for a new day? He nodded. I never imagined that one day I'd sleep in this room. He looked around the luxurious bedroom. Thank you, Harry. I shook my head. There's no need to thank me. This is my job. And more importantly, this room, this villa, it all belongs to you. So don't feel grateful for taking back what's already yours. Max smiled before getting out of bed. He freshened up, got dressed, and stood before the bedroom door. Just before opening it, I reminded him. The face. He looked at me. Cold. Calm. Don't let anyone read your thoughts. Max gave a slight nod. The warm smile on his face disappeared. His expression returned to its usual calm indifference. He opened the door. 2 bodyguards were already standing outside. The moment they saw him, they bowed respectfully. Good morning, young master. Max acknowledged them with a small nod. Then, without another word, he walked toward the dining room. A new day had officially begun. Max calmly walked into the dining room. Richard, Evelyn, Alex, everyone was already seated, except David and Diana. I quickly checked. Diana went to call David. They'll be here in a minute. Max simply nodded. He pulled out a chair and sat down. Without waiting for anyone, he picked up the serving spoon and served himself. After all, the servants weren't going to do it. Those servants had long been taking David's orders. Some of them had even bullied Max over the years. Thinking about it, I frowned. This wouldn't do. Silently, I began creating another mission. As for the reward, I already had the perfect idea. Max quietly continued eating. The dining room remained silent. Nobody spoke. A few moments later, David and Diana entered together. David rubbed his sleepy eyes. It seemed he had quite enjoyed his first night in the servants' quarters. Evelyn looked at him with concern. David, why are you late today? David forced a smile. It's nothing, Mom. I'm just trying to adjust to the new room. It'll take some time. Hearing that, Evelyn's heart ached. Before she could speak, Diana stepped forward. Adjust. Mom. It's not just difficult. It's impossible. That room is so small. It's cramped. There's barely any space. I don't even know how David managed to sleep there. You have to do something. Evelyn sighed. She gently held David's hand. Sit down first. Eat something. David nodded obediently. The servants immediately served him breakfast. I noticed something amusing. They still ignored Max completely. Interesting. That would be fixed soon enough. As everyone quietly ate, Alex suddenly spoke. David, there are still guest rooms in the villa. You can move into one of them. David immediately shook his head.
No.
Brother told me to stay there. If I move, he'll be angry. As he spoke, a few tears rolled down his cheeks. I almost laughed. What an excellent performance. Right on cue, everyone's expression softened. Alex looked toward Max. Max, David is having a hard time. He's never lived in such a small room before. That room is too cramped. Please let him move somewhere else. Max slowly stopped eating. He raised his eyes. His expression remained calm. Before David, I lived there, and if I remember correctly, that was his idea. He looked directly at David. Yes, this is revenge. I have no intention of pretending to be generous. Silence. Everyone lowered their heads. They had forgotten. For years, Max had been living in that same room. Yet, none of them had cared. Diana suddenly spoke. But, there are so many things that don't even fit in that room. How is David supposed to manage? You didn't have this many belongings. The moment those words left her mouth, she froze. So did everyone else. Because they all realized, David had countless expensive belongings. Max had almost nothing. Max calmly wiped his mouth with a napkin. So, the belongings are the problem. He nodded slightly. I have a solution. Everyone looked at him hopefully. Max spoke in the coldest voice imaginable. Sell everything. Keep only the necessary items. That should make the room much more comfortable. Then, he calmly resumed eating. The entire dining room froze. No one had expected such an answer. Richard suddenly slammed his hand onto the table. Max, you're getting out of control. How can you sell someone else's belongings? Max looked at him. A faint smile appeared on his face. I can. And I will. Evelyn hurriedly interrupted. Max, please think about it. We're family. Max placed his glass of juice on the table. Oh, right. We're family. He slowly looked around the room. Then David shouldn't suffer alone. If family shares happiness, they should also share hardship. He took another sip of juice. I was actually going to announce this last night, but I was tired, so I postponed it until this morning. He stood up. When you decided to put me in the servants' quarters, it wasn't David's decision alone. All of you agreed. So from today onward, every one of you will move into the servants' quarters. When I'm in a good mood, I might let you move back. The room became deathly silent. Alex stared at him. What? You want us to leave our rooms? Max nodded. Yes. He looked at all of them one by one. Don't you love David? He's your family. Then support him. Family should stay together. His voice suddenly turned ice cold. And before anyone says another word, remember one thing. This is my house. I give the orders. If any of you are unhappy, the door is always open. You may leave. He knew they couldn't. If news spread that the Sterling family had been kicked out of their own villa, Sterling Corporation's reputation would suffer. Richard could never allow that. Max pushed his chair back. Without another glance, he walked toward the exit. Behind him, Diana's face flushed with humiliation. Max, how dare you? Richard's fists trembled with rage. His own son was ordering him out of his bedroom, but Max never stopped walking. Not once did he look back. I smiled. Good, very good. They had finally tasted a fraction of the life Max had endured for years, and this was only the beginning. I couldn't stop laughing. Ha ha ha. Perfect. That was absolutely perfect. Max walked out of the dining room without looking back. The moment we stepped outside the villa, I looked at him with a grin. Now, let's go have some fun. Max looked at me in confusion. Fun? I nodded. Don't tell me you've already forgotten. You have $100 million. So spend some of it. He blinked. Spend it. I smiled bitterly. In my previous life, I desperately wanted money. I worked day and night. I dreamed of becoming rich. But before I could enjoy any of it, I died. I looked up at the sky. So this time, I'm not making the same mistake. Revenge is important, but it isn't everything. The most important thing is enjoying life, because no one knows when it might end. Max silently listened. Then, he gave a small nod. All right, let's go. A smile spread across my face. That's more like it. For the rest of the day, we simply enjoyed ourselves. Max bought new clothes, visited places he had only seen in advertisements, walked through luxury shopping malls, tried different foods. Even though I couldn't physically eat, watching him enjoy everything somehow made me feel satisfied. It was the first time, for both of us. By the time evening arrived, the sky had already turned dark. Max parked the car outside a high-end restaurant. He quietly finished his dinner. The moment he walked out, I smiled again. Good. Now it's time. Max glanced at me. Another mission? I nodded. Exactly. He looked curious. What is it? I folded my arms. Think about it. We're taking revenge on everyone who mistreated you. We're not saints. And we're definitely not generous enough to pretend nothing happened. My eyes narrowed. So tell me, how did a group of servants gather enough courage to bully the owner of this villa? Max's expression turned cold. They had David backing them. Exactly. I snapped my fingers. So it's time to clean the house. Call the estate manager. Tell him you're dissatisfied with the current staff. They ignored the owner. They insulted the owner. They followed someone else's orders inside your own house. I smiled. Such people don't deserve to work there. As for the replacements, the estate manager will handle it. He'll recruit new servants. But this time, they'll know exactly who their master is. Max nodded. I understand. He took out his phone. Without a trace of hesitation, he dialed the estate manager's number. The cleanup had officially begun. After ending the call, Max put his phone back into his pocket. Done. I nodded with satisfaction. Good. He looked at me expectantly. So, where's my reward? I chuckled. So impatient. Wait a little. The mission is still being processed. Max looked confused. Processed? I nodded. Think about it. The mission wasn't to make a phone call. It was to remove those servants from the Sterling villa. The estate manager still has to notify them. They still have to pack their belongings. And they still have to leave. Only after every single one of them walks out of that villa will the mission truly be complete.
Mox nodded in understanding.
So until then, Nori worth. Exactly, I smiled. Don't worry, it won't take long. Besides, I've prepared something you'll definitely like. Max couldn't help becoming curious. What is it? I laughed. If I tell you now, it won't be called a reward anymore. So be patient. You'll find out soon enough. Max shook his head helplessly. Fine. I stretched lazily. Now, let's head home. By the time we get there, the estate manager should have already started cleaning up the villa. Max started the car. The engine roared to life. As we drove back toward the Sterling villa, a smile slowly appeared on my face. The servants had bullied Max for years, simply because David backed them. But from today onward, that backing would no longer exist. Some mistakes could be forgiven, but daring to humiliate the owner of the house was never one of them. By the time we reached the Sterling villa, the entire place was already in turmoil. Several servants stood in the courtyard with their luggage. Some argued, some looked frightened. In the middle of it all, a middle-aged man was sternly scolding a few of them. You dared to ignore the young master. Do you even realize how serious this is? You've embarrassed the entire estate management company. Just then, he noticed Max. His expression immediately changed. He hurried over and bowed respectfully. Young Master Max.
I am deeply sorry.
I never expected the staff under my management to behave this way. If I had known earlier, I would have dismissed them long ago. Max looked at me. I simply shrugged. It isn't his fault. He wasn't the one bullying you. Let him do his job.
Mox nodded.
It's all right. Just make sure something like this never happens again. The manager immediately bowed. It won't. I personally selected every new staff member. They've all been informed of your position. They know who the owner of this villa is. Max nodded before entering the villa. The moment he sat on the sofa, a new servant immediately approached. Young master, your water. Max accepted the glass. He took a sip, placed it back onto the table. Everything felt completely different. Not long after, Evelyn, Alex, and Diana came downstairs. The moment they saw unfamiliar faces working around the villa, they stopped. Evelyn looked at the estate manager. What happened to the previous staff? The manager respectfully answered. They've all been replaced, madam. Young Master Max was dissatisfied with their service, and they repeatedly failed to respect the owner of the villa. Silence. Nobody spoke. A strange feeling filled everyone's hearts. Even the servants. Halt bullied Max. Max stood up. Without saying a word, he walked upstairs to rest. Richard returned late that night. He was exhausted from work. After hearing a brief explanation, he simply went to bed. The next morning, everyone gathered around the dining table. Everyone, except Max. As usual, Richard looked at one of the servants. Serve breakfast. The servant politely bowed. I'm sorry, master. We're waiting for young master. Richard frowned. David is already here. The servant remained respectful. I meant young Master Max. Richard's face darkened. Since when do we wait for him? We've always started breakfast before he arrived. Serve the food. Before the servant could reply, Evelyn sighed. They're the new staff. They don't know our old routine. Richard frowned. What? New staff? Who replaced everyone? Diana answered helplessly. It was Max. David lowered his head. Brother has changed a lot. He's making decisions on his own now. He doesn't even ask Dad anymore. Richard slammed his hand on the table. What exactly is his problem? He looked back at the servant. So all of us have to wait? The servant nodded. Those are young Master Max's instructions. At that moment, I had already woken Max up. He smiled after hearing everything. They're waiting. I laughed. Looks like they're finally experiencing what it feels like. Max wasn't in any hurry. He leisurely got ready. Nearly half an hour later, he finally walked downstairs. The moment he sat down, the servants immediately began serving breakfast. Alex frowned. She looked at the table. Why is today's menu different? And where's my orange juice? My usual breakfast isn't here. The servant answered politely. Young Master Max changed today's menu. These are his instructions. Richard couldn't hold himself back anymore. He glared at the servants. Listen carefully. Don't change anything in this house. I'm the head of this family. You follow my orders. The servant had tolerated enough since morning. He had remained respectful, patient, professional. But this time, his patience finally ran out. He looked at Richard. His tone remained calm, but noticeably colder. I'm sorry, sir. Our employer changed yesterday. Young Master Max pays our salaries now. So, we follow his instructions. I almost choked, then burst into laughter. Ha ha ha. I like this guy. Even Max nearly smiled. Across the table, everyone was stunned. Diana nearly dropped her spoon. Richard looked at Max in disbelief. You're paying them? Where did you get that kind of money? David quickly answered. Dad, remember Grandpa's black card? Brother must be using that. Richard immediately remembered. His expression became even uglier. Mox. You received $100 million. Why are you spending it so carelessly? You replaced the entire staff without even discussing it. David nodded. Brother, you shouldn't waste money like this. If you invested it in the company, it would have helped Dad a lot. Richard and Evelyn exchanged satisfied glances. Their son was so thoughtful, so mature. Then, Max calmly looked at David. Shut up. The dining room instantly became silent. It's my money. I'll decide how I spend it. So don't lecture me. He calmly finished his breakfast, placed his napkin on the table, then stood up and left. Not another word. The entire family watched him leave. Alex sighed. Mom. Dad. He's become completely unreasonable. Evelyn looked helpless. We can't do anything. They quietly resumed eating. Meanwhile, I was still laughing. I really like that servant. He has potential. Mox chuckled. Then he changed into his school uniform. After all, he wasn't going to waste every day sitting inside the villa. Just as he stepped outside, he suddenly remembered something. Harry, my mission. It's completed. So, where's my reward? A mysterious smile appeared on my face. It has already arrived. Max looked confused. What do you mean? I pointed toward the front gate. Go outside. And wait. Curiosity filled Max's eyes. He walked out of the villa. At that exact moment, the family's driver was already waiting. David came outside wearing his school uniform. The driver respectfully opened the rear door. David deliberately glanced at Max. A smug smile appeared on his face before he got into the car. The luxury car slowly drove away. The meaning behind that smile was obvious. You may own the house, but I'm still the one everyone treats like the real young master. Max quietly watched the car disappear. For a brief moment, his expression darkened. I wasn't worried at all. Instead, a grin slowly spread across my face. Relax. The reward I prepared is much cooler than a family car. I looked toward the villa gate. It should be here. Any second now. Max stood quietly outside the villa. He looked at me. So, where's my reward? I smiled. Be patient. It should be here any moment. Just then, a large enclosed vehicle trailer slowly stopped outside the villa gate. The driver climbed down carrying a clipboard. He looked around before asking loudly, Is Max Sterling here? Max stepped forward. I'm Max Sterling. The driver nodded. Perfect. I have a vehicle delivery for you. Please sign here. Max glanced at me. I simply nodded. He signed the papers. The driver checked the signature before smiling professionally. Thank you. He walked back to the trailer. With the press of a button, the rear ramp slowly lowered. A few seconds later, a brand new Lamborghini Revuelto slowly rolled down the trailer. The sunlight reflected beautifully across its sharp bodywork. The driver parked it in front of Max. He handed over the key. Everything has been delivered. Have a nice day. Without another word, he climbed back into the trailer.
Moments later.
The trailer drove away. The villa became quiet once again. Max stood there, looking at the car in front of him. Even his usually calm expression showed a trace of surprise. Cool. It's perfect. He looked at me. Harry, how much does this cost? I smiled proudly. Around 9 crore. Max's eyes widened slightly. So expensive? I laughed. It's a system reward. Why are you worrying about the price? Just enjoy it. A smile slowly appeared on Max's face. You're right. I floated beside him. Enough admiring it. Let's go. You're already late for school. Max pressed the unlock button. Beep. The Lamborghini's lights flashed. The scissor door slowly lifted upward. Max couldn't help smiling again. So this is how these doors open. He got inside, pulled the door shut. Then, he pressed the start button. Vroom. The naturally aspirated V12 roared to life. Its thunderous sound echoed throughout the entire street. Inside the villa, everyone suddenly stopped what they were doing. Richard looked toward the window. What was that? Alex frowned. That sounded like a supercar. Diana walked over to the balcony. But, I don't see anything. Outside, the Revuelto smoothly pulled away from the villa. Within seconds, it disappeared from the street. Not a single member of the Sterling family realized. The supercar they had just heard belonged to Max Vroom. The Lamborghini Revuelto shot through the streets like a beast set free. Its naturally aspirated V12 roared so loudly that everyone nearby instinctively turned their heads. Car enthusiasts immediately recognized the sound. That's a Lamborghini. Even those who knew nothing about cars could tell from the thunderous engine alone that it wasn't an ordinary vehicle. Max calmly held the steering wheel. A smile unknowingly appeared on his face. This feels amazing. I laughed. I told you, money exists to be enjoyed. The Revuelto continued cutting through traffic. Soon, it arrived at City International High School. Meanwhile, David had already reached school. As always, he stepped out of his black Mercedes-Benz S-Class. The luxury sedan immediately attracted many glances. After all, even though the students studying here belonged to wealthy families, a car worth nearly 20 million rupees wasn't something every student drove. David had always been proud of it. He casually adjusted his uniform. His friends immediately walked over. Morning, David. Morning. The group chatted as they headed toward the school gate. Just then, vroom. A deafening engine roar echoed across the campus entrance. Everyone instinctively stopped. What was that? They all turned around. A sleek black Lamborghini Revuelto smoothly approached the school gate. The sunlight reflected off its razor-sharp body. Its aggressive design instantly became the center of attention. Someone near the gate widened his eyes. Holy, that's a Lamborghini Revuelto. The moment those words were spoken, more and more students rushed toward the entrance. What? A Revuelto? No way. David also turned around. The instant he saw the car, even he couldn't hide the shock in his eyes. He knew exactly what it was. The Revuelto slowly entered the campus. Without showing off, without revving the engine again, it quietly drove toward the student parking area. Then, it came to a smooth stop. Within seconds, students began surrounding the car. Nobody dared get too close. Instead, they stood at a respectful distance. Whispers spread everywhere. Who owns it? Which family is this from? I've never seen this car before. It must belong to some billionaire's son. One of David's friends quickly took out his phone. He searched the model online. A few seconds later, his eyes nearly popped out. Ashi. Everyone looked at him. What? He swallowed hard. This car. He slowly raised his phone. Costs around 90 million. Silence. Complete silence. The crowd stared at the Lamborghini in disbelief. 90 million. Many of them came from wealthy families. Yet even they found that amount unbelievable. Their curiosity reached its peak. Just who was the owner of this monster?